Hello and welcome to Talking Aussie Books, a weekly podcast bringing readers and writers of Australian fiction together. I'm Claudine Tinellis. As an avid reader and passionate advocate for Australian fiction, I make it my mission to spotlight local talent. So if you're looking for your next read or simply want to learn more about the Australian literary scene, this podcast is for you. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and relax. Most of you out there who listen to this podcast will know that I love reading all types of books. Crime, thriller, domestic noir, family drama, YA, magical realism and romance. You name it, I probably have it on my bookshelf. But there's nothing quite like reading a rom-com for pure escapism and sheer joy. And this week, I finished reading a cracker of a novel from a relatively new author. Melbourne-based Nina Kenwood won the Text Prize in 2018 for her debut YA novel, It Sounded Better in My Head, which was published by Text Publishing here in Australia in 2019 and in the US by Flatiron Books in 2020. This year, Nina is back with her second novel called Unnecessary Drama, a book which had me laughing out loud on a number of occasions, a thoroughly delightful, feel-good novel about moving out of home, life as a uni student, falling in love and dealing with what Nina has termed an anxious brain. This is a book which can be enjoyed equally by young adults as well as a more mature audience. It gave me Sally Thorne and Beth O'Leary vibes, so if you enjoy either of these authors, then you will absolutely love Unnecessary Drama. And I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to chat with Nina about her book on the podcast today. Welcome, Nina.
Hi, thanks for having me. And thanks for the Sally Thorne and Beth O'Leary comparison. I'm huge fans of both. So.
I guess that you would be, absolutely. Sally Thorne has been a guest on this podcast. Now, congratulations on book number 2. It's only been out for a little while here in Australia, but I am seeing it everywhere at the moment. Have you been happy with the reception it's getting?
Absolutely. Booksellers have been incredibly supportive. My first book, It Sounded Better in My Head, it found success through bookseller support. That was just really, really wonderful. And I feel the love from booksellers again for this one. So that's so nice.
It might be a bit of an odd place to start, but I wondered if you would tell me a little bit about your journey to publication. I mean, winning the Text Prize in 2018 was a significant milestone in your writing career, but how long before that were you writing and what did winning the Text Prize mean for you?
I was writing from the time I was a teenager. I wanted to be a writer. I was a teenager in the 90s, which was a bit of a heyday of Australian YA. That's when Isabel Carmody's Over Newton series, Melina Machetta, Looking for Ella Brandy, and John Marsden's Tomorrow series all came out, and they were all my favourites. I was obsessed with them all. When I was 15, I went to John Marsden was running writing camps on his property. This was before it became a school. And I went to a writing camp there, and that weekend really solidified in my mind I wanted to be a writer. And then I started creative writing at uni, and then I worked in publishing. I worked in bookselling throughout my 20s, and I always had this idea, you've got to write your first novel by the time you're 30. I don't know why. Everyone sets these these deadlines for themselves, and I did not write it. I just kept writing manuscripts, getting to that halfway point and giving up. I didn't know how to get through the sort of messy middle. I didn't realize that it was okay for your first draft to be an absolute disaster. That's normal, which I know now, but didn't then. And so I was just giving up all the time. I was never I wasn't sure what kind of book I wanted to write. I just hadn't found my voice. And then I met 2 friends who were also writers, and we started a writing group. And that's when things really clicked for me. Their support, and we would do like writing goals and challenges, word count challenges. And that really kept me going to finish the manuscript and polish it up and get it ready for the Text Prize. I didn't know if it was, I didn't think it really even had a chance. And then so to win the Text Prize was absolutely amazing and life-changing. It all sort of happened from there.
As I said, I absolutely loved Unnecessary Drama, and Brooke's voice was captivating. She was warm, funny. She was incredibly self-deprecating, yet confident, assertive, and self-assured in so many other respects. Who or what inspired Brooke's story?
So everyone says write your get your second book written before your first book comes out, because then you can sort of write that second book in the safe space before your first book is out there and you're vulnerable to the world and its thoughts on you, and you're reading feedback on your writing. But I didn't do that, mostly because I was pregnant in the lead up to my first book coming out. I just could not write a word. And then that first year, the first 9 months after having the baby, was also a terrible creative time, as you can imagine. You're just not in a headspace to be writing a rom-com. I was feeling neither romantic or comedic.
Funny that.
Yeah. But then I started feeling more like myself, and I'd got through the very worst of the sleep deprivation, and so I was sort of going into 2020 thinking, this is going to be my year, this is going to be great, I'll go back to work, parent, and write the book. It's all going to happen. And then, of course, COVID hit, and none of that happened. Well, I mean, everything went to chaos, and I was in a very anxious state. And that anxiety kind of was how I found Brooke, who is a very anxious character. Her anxieties are very different as an 18-year-old to the anxieties I was having as a 30-something mother during COVID. COVID is not in the book, and as the book is a rom-com and it's funny, so it's not a dark story, but I found Brooke's sort of anxious voice, we were kind of vibrating on the same level, I guess you could say, in terms of anxiety about different things. And so that's sort of how I discovered her voice, sort of in 2020. The world was chaos. And I was also really trying to find some joy. The world felt very dark. I was very anxious. So it was the anxiety, but also making it funny and finding joy and writing something that gave me joy and would hopefully give other people joy.
Yeah. So was there a particular spark of inspiration that was the jumping off point for the actual story?
I spend a lot of time when I start working on the book just finding the character's voice and just I don't even call my first draft a first draft. I call it a draft zero. I just am writing to find the character's voice. There's a lot of just internal monologues and dialogue and random. I'm not even thinking about plot. Literally just trying to find that character and bring her alive. And then once I have her, then I go forward and think about the plot. So the spark is found in that draft zero of trying to find that voice, find the humor, find who she is as a character. And so it's a lot of trial and error. But once she's there and I have the voice, then I know I can go forward with the whole book.
Fantastic. So for those who haven't yet read your book, Nina, I was wondering if you could tell us more about the story.
Sure. So as I've mentioned, it's a rom-com. It's set in first year uni. It's in a share house in Melbourne. It's about Brooke, who is a very type A, very organized, very rule-following, anxious, slightly neurotic 18-year-old girl who is moving from her small town to Melbourne for the first time, and she thinks she's moving into a share house with two strangers. And when she gets there, she realizes that one of her housemates is not a stranger. It is Jessie, her friend turned nemesis from high school. And so she has to find a way, that sets the scene for her first year at uni. And she has to sort of find a way to coexist in the house with Jessie. And of course, the tension between them is also a romantic, it's a rom-com. So there's a sort of slow burn romance there, as well as following Brooke through her experience of moving out of home, making new friendship, dealing with family stuff, dealing with anxiety, and all of the elements that make up that first year when you move out of home.
Nina, there are some serious themes in this novel, but you address them with levity, like when parents divorce, remarry, and have families with their new spouses, or just difficult relationships generally with absent parents, and also dealing with differences in high school. So I wondered, when crafting this story, and you kind of answered it a little bit already, but were these things that you wanted to capture in the narrative, or did it come about because of your characters?
Definitely came about because of the characters. And I knew, sort of building out Brooke and Jessie, I knew that they both were going to have sort of difficulties with their different kinds of difficulties with their families, but difficulties that would allow them to bond and that talk together and support each other. It's not the kind of book where all the problems are solved by the end in any way. It's more about sort of sharing and talking about your problems with someone else. And yeah, so that's sort of where, and making them well-rounded characters and giving them things to deal with, but yeah, touching on it lightly because it is a book full of joy, I hope.
Now, tell me about Brooke's anxious brain. I mean, you've already spoken a little bit about it, but she reminded me of many young women I know today, women who are intelligent, who are articulate, who are incredibly confident, and yet don't necessarily see themselves the way other people do and constantly second guessing themselves. So I wanted to ask you, how did you get inside Brooke's head?
I mean, I have an anxious brain. I am a very anxious person, so it's not difficult for me to find anxiety. But I am a different. Brooke and I are very different people. So it's also, I think there is it's being authentic to the teenage experience, and I think that for a lot of young women in their teens and in their 20s, there's a lot of people suffering with anxiety. There's an anxiety epidemic. The world is an anxious place. The pressures around doing well and achieving and finding your sort of what you want to do with your life, combined with from climate change through to COVID, all of the things going on is really set the scene for a lot of people to suffer with anxiety. And that's something I wanted to explore.
Yeah, and you do it so well in this book, and you really capture the essence of Brooke's concerns and worries, and the things that keep her up at night. So, yeah, so well done on that.
Oh, thank you.
Having said that, I had to keep reminding myself that she was only 18. She was incredibly mature, and yet at the same time lacked self-confidence, didn't she?
Yeah, yeah. So I think as a character, she's the younger sibling, but she has an older sister who is a little bit wild and has a few issues. And I think you often read about stories of the older sibling having to parent the younger sibling, and this is a little bit flipped on its head with the younger sibling having to worry and look after or feel like she needs to look after her older sibling. And so she's carrying that weight. And I think that in some ways, that and her issues with her father have made Brooke more mature in some ways, but also she's still very much a teenager and she's got all of the insecurities that come with that. And she's, that mix of mature for her age in some ways and absolutely not in others, which is something I've written 2 books with 18-year-old characters, and I think that that's the sweet spot that I really like writing about, that mix of you're an adult sort of, but you're not. And you get to be both mature and still young and discovering things and having all those wonderful firsts of first love, first share house, first time at uni, making new friends, all of that.
It's a wonderful time in many respects. And I kind of wanted to go, if I could talk to Brooke and I could say, look, just enjoy it. You'll never get this time back again. The things that I say to my kids, you'll never have this time back again. Enjoy it. Just wonderful. Now, Jesse was also another wonderful character. As Brooke's nemesis, he wasn't as one-dimensional as Brooke wanted us to believe. I mean, he had his own issues along with his own lack of self-confidence, didn't he?
Yes. And so the story hinges on, in many ways, their backstory. They're friends, they're 14, an incident happens between them that Brooke feels is a very deep betrayal that wounds her, and she holds it as a grudge and she's not intending to ever get over it. It had to be something bad enough that it was definitely something that you could relate to and understand how that would be devastating for a 14-year-old. But also, like, a 14-year-old boy is not going to be perfect. They're going to make mistakes. And you needed, as a reader, I still wanted you to fall in love with Jesse while seeing his flaws. So just to make sure he was a well-rounded character, to make sure that what happened then was understandable, and that showing not just through his words but through his actions in the book that you could see that who he really was and how he really felt about Brooke.
He was just a delightful character as well. Now, Nita, you alluded to this a little bit earlier on, but what I wanted to know is, when you started writing, did you always think that you were going to write YA, or had you actually experimented with other genres?
I look, I was mostly trying to write YA because that's sort of is what came naturally. But before I started writing my first book, I was trying to write quite a serious, dark adult book, and it was not working.
Mm.
And I was really stuck. And then I woke up one day feeling like I just want to write a funny YA rom-com, and that's when I found that character's voice, Natalie, and it just flowed from there. And I think once you find your voice as a writer and you sort of find your strengths, and I remember I'd written 3 chapters and my writing group said, this is really funny. And it was like a revelation. Oh, maybe I'm a funny writer. Maybe I can write comedy, or, you know, it can be comedic. That was a sort of new idea to me, even though I obviously sort of love comedic books and film and TV. I sort of leaned into that. Oh, okay, this is a whole new direction that I can try. And that's actually maybe who I am as a writer.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you found your voice in that respect. As I said, I absolutely laughed out loud in many spots in this book. I
Thank
can
you.
think of one scene in particular. I was just holding my belly, just cackling with laughter. Just, yeah, just wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
So, what is it about this genre, the YA genre in particular, that draws you to it?
I think, as I said before, I love the idea of first. I think there's just so much to explore there, especially from, you know, a comedic angle, as well as it's just the voice that naturally comes to me. And I fell in love with books when I was a teenager in a way that maybe I never have since, in sort of reading them, rereading them, obsessing over them, what they gave to me emotionally and personally. And I really love the idea of writing for teenagers and putting them first, sort of as the first reader you think about. While the book is for everyone, making sure that it's really authentic to teenagers, which is really hard. And it's a very particular, I guess, skill that you have to build up to write for different age groups and think about how to handle different things, how to make social media be present without it feeling inauthentic and or trying too hard, and all of those different elements. But at the same time, nothing really changes. Like, everyone from my childhood to my parents' childhood to teenagers now, first love is always going to be those still tricky feelings. Everyone's still going to have insecurities. Like, the feelings don't change.
And I think that's what I really loved about this book, was that it was so clearly suitable for all age ranges. Well, you know, as you say, I think 13 plus, but I'm a 50 plus year old woman and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I could see my 16-year-old daughter really enjoying this as well. You know, it's something that we can talk about, that we can bond over. And I agree, it must be an incredible skill to, you know, write with different audiences in mind.
Yeah, it's something you have to be aware of when you're writing YA, or if you're writing middle grade or junior fiction. And I think the key is to read what's out there now, not just to think, oh, well, I loved YA when I was a teenager, so I'll write about that. But you have to read really widely what's out there currently, what's selling, what people are loving, and watch, you know, shows that are for a teen audience, or for, you know, maybe for everyone, but featuring teenagers. Really tap into the pop culture of today to understand what is working and what's not, and what kind of stories are being told and how they're being told.
Yeah. And I love that Brooke and Jessie bonded over one particular television series.
Yes, that was one of my personal comfort shows when I was a bit younger, and, you know, I still watch it occasionally now. There's always, when you're a writer, shall I put in a fake TV show or a real one? And I decided, no, I'm just going to throw in a real TV show.
I think that's what I also loved about it. And the feeling and the emotion behind that for Brooke was that it is her comfort. It's her go-to. We all have that comfort book or that comfort TV show that, you know, we don't have to think when we're watching it. We know it inside out, and we know that we're just going to feel settled and comforted when we're watching it or reading it.
Yeah. That was sort of, it's an important part of Brooke and her anxieties and the way she copes with things is to have not just her comfort show, but like she watches it in a particular way and at a particular time. And this is how she sort of, it soothes her. It was an important part of her.
Okay. So, Nina, if there was one thing that you would like readers to take away from this novel, what would it be?
I would like them to take away I guess, joy and happiness and laughter. I love the idea of someone reading my book with a big smile on their face. I love the idea of writing the kind of book that maybe you'll sit down and read all in one sitting, because I just have such vivid, there are books on my bookshelf that I look at and I remember the reading experience. I remember smiling or laughing or just not being able to stop reading. And that's the kind of book I'm trying to write and the kind of experience I'm hoping to give readers.
Nina, your journey is incredibly inspiring. And so, for the many writers out there who listen to this podcast, do you have any tips about writing or getting published that you could offer?
Definitely tip one is finishing that first draft. That was the mistake I made endlessly, was just giving up when it got really, really hard. But that's what a first draft is. It's going to be a hideous mess. It's going to be really hard. You'll finish it and there'll be plot holes everywhere. That's fine. Having something to fix is better than having nothing. And yeah, just keep working at it as well. It does take a long time to as same as any other skill. You've just got to keep working at it and read what's out there now in the genre that you're trying to write into.
Nina, are you working on something else at the moment?
Yes, I am trying to write my third book, which is going to be an adult rom-com. So it is something new for me. So we're seeing how that's going. It's all very early stages.
If listeners wanted to learn more about you and your books, where can they find you, Nina?
So I have a website, ninakenwood.com, and I am on Twitter, but I think who knows how long Twitter as a platform is even going to last. Maybe it'll be gone by the time this airs. And I'm on Instagram, both under my name, Nina Kenwood.
Fantastic. Nina, I'm so glad I discovered you and your books. Unnecessary Drama was a wonderful read. Thank you for joining me on Talking Aussie Books today.
Thank you for having me.
That's a wrap, folks. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please drop me a line via my webpage at claudinetinellis.com, via Instagram, Facebook or Twitter. Alternatively, consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or Google Podcasts. Until next time, happy reading.